Hello and welcome. I'm Dianna Anderson and I'm the CEO of Cylient and happy to welcome you to our dialogue today, which is how do I get senior leaders to take coaching-based leadership seriously? We decided to have this dialogue after talking with a number of our clients and others who were really interested in trying to support leaders to take a coaching-based approach to the challenges that they're facing. And we're finding it just incredibly difficult to actually have those conversations or to get the leaders to really understand what coaching-based leadership was and really why it matters now. So we decided to have a dialogue to get into that conversation. And the way that this is going to work today is we are going to share some ideas. I'm going to put out some ideas for you to consider and would love to be in dialogue with you to hear what your questions are, what your observations are, so that we, in true coaching style, can learn with and from each other. So please feel free. Time, and we will be able to be in dialogue and learn together. So the first thing that I'd like to talk about is what exactly is coaching-based leadership? For those of you that might be newer to the conversation, I think that's an important place to begin. So when I say coaching-based leadership, what I mean is that coaching is getting integrated into the fabric of any conversation with anybody at any time about anything. So it could be as simple as asking someone a question instead of making a statement or pushing a point. Or it could be sharing an observation that gets someone to kind of think about something from a different perspective. And this could just be woven right into the conversation. So it doesn't have to feel like we are in a specific coaching conversation per se. So it doesn't feel like it is more of a coaching engagement, which was one of the questions that was posed ahead of this dialogue, which is what's the difference between in the moment coaching and more traditional, say 1 hour type coaching engagements. And well, similar tools can be used in both of these conversations. When we are in a coaching engagement, typically this is an ongoing conversation. There's a commitment between the coach and typically what we would consider the client or the person receiving the coaching. Often there are goals that guide an engagement, and there's an expectation that we are going to be working on those goals over time. In the moment or coaching, on the other hand, can happen with anybody, anywhere. It's not a formal agreement. It's actually more of a leadership style that people adopt when they want to help others learn, grow, move through change more quickly or easily, or just build a connection, maybe even create more of a sense of synergy with somebody else. These would be reasons that we would use coaching-based leadership. And I think another way to understand what coaching-based leadership is to actually contrast it with our traditional approaches to leadership, which are typically what happens when the leader believes that it's their job to have the right answer. And they believe that as a leader, they should know what that right answer is, and they should be giving that to other people in order to help them know what to do. And typically the focus is really on being able to keep everything and everyone kind of under control. Whereas in the moment coaching is much more based on creating learning, opening possibilities, creating connections. So, by the way, they can be used together. It's not an either or situation. In fact, at Cylient, our sole focus is really creating coaching as a culture. And we like to talk about how you partner these two kinds of leadership styles together. So we talk about using our traditional problem-solving type approach to coaching to manage things, so processes and technology, that kind of thing. And we talk about using coaching approaches to manage and support people, and that the real artistry in leadership is being able to use them both together. So I think one of the big questions we need to ask ourselves is, why does this matter now? And I'm going to share with you some ideas why I think coaching is really the leadership approach that we need to be using right now. But feel free, if you've got some ideas about why it's important in your organization at this point, put it in the chat. Why do you think your leaders really need to be taking a coaching approach to the interactions that they're engaging in? Why is that important, both for the leaders and for your organization? So would love to hear from you, and while I'm sharing some of my thoughts around this. For me, I think coaching-based leadership is really essential right now because traditional approaches to leadership are really based on a stable world where we have some very solid sense of what we need to do and why it matters. And with the amount of uncertainty that we're currently experiencing, we really need to be kind of rethinking what we're doing, what's important, the kinds of questions that we're being forced into right now. Questions like, how do we stay relevant, in this pandemic world? What do our customers want and need from us right now? What do our employees want and need from us right now? Where is the world headed to? What's going to be important as we move forward? These are not straightforward questions. These are multifaceted questions that involve or are going to be best answered by bringing people with different perspectives, different points of view, different ways of thinking and being together into conversation. And for those kinds of conversations to really evoke thoughtful possibilities, we really need to take a coaching approach to them. The other thing is, we really, really need to support our people right now. And traditional leadership approaches are good when the world is very stable and we can point towards what people need to do. But this sort of sea of emotional transition that we find ourselves in requires a different touch. It requires that we be able to hear and actually deal with the emotional side of change. And traditional leadership just doesn't do that well. Let me just take a quick moment and look at the chat here and share with you some of the things that people are sharing with us. And thank you, folks, for sharing these ideas. One is Abe says that what's important is allowing us as individual contributors to use knowledge and skills rather than just taking orders. Yeah, so important. We need all hands on deck right now. And what coaching does is really invites people to bring the best that they have to offer into any conversation. So important to invite people to bring the best that they have. And that's what coaching does. Kathy says it helps team members generate a sense of control in the world that is changing daily. Yes, this is really, really an important point, which is the world is going to continue to evolve and change for a really long time now, right? This is not going to be a quick fix. We're not headed back to something really stable anytime soon. And coaching, when we coach people to actually be able to find their center in a world of uncertainty, we actually restore them to their sense of power, and they become more confident. They are able to better contribute. And this is really, really important, not only for the individuals, but for our entire organizations right now, to have people standing on that kind of solid ground. Let's see, what else am I hearing here? You're right that the business world is unstable. We need to talk through processes and ideas. Exactly. We're all on the same page here, that when we take a coaching approach to these kinds of conversations that are really designed to help us think through what's possible and what's relevant right now, we are able to evoke and weave together the best thinking that everyone has to offer. And we need that right now. And it's through coaching-based leadership, I think, that we are really able to get into this space. So the question is, I think one of the next questions is, so why aren't leaders just jumping on that bandwagon and just automatically using coaching-based leadership? So I've got some ideas, but again, I'd love to hear from you. What do you think's going on in your world? If you've been inviting your leaders to embrace coaching-based leadership and they're not there, what do you think's getting in the way? For me, I think one of the big things is they actually don't know what it is. There are so many definitions of what coaching is now, and coaching is used in so many different ways. And what's really, really important to understand is the difference between what I would call faux coaching and real coaching. Lots of expressions of both, so you don't need to have to go with one particular camp per se, but faux coaching, as far as I'm concerned, is coaching that is actually very much what we call coaching, but is literally traditional approaches to leadership being practiced by asking questions. So the questions are typically manipulative. They are closed-ended. They're driving people towards a defined answer that typically the leader has already decided upon. And when we use this kind of coaching loosely, it is actually no better than using a traditional approach to leadership. In fact, sometimes I think it's worse because it takes a whole lot longer to get there. And we're not getting that benefit of evoking that aha experience that creates learning, which is what motivates people to change. And this is the essence of real coaching, that it is that evoking of insight that creates new synapses in our brain, which causes people to go, aha, yes, that's a great idea. And that's what motivates people to take change or make change. That's why we use coaching, is to get that release of energy. And so one of the first things I think we need to do is make sure that leaders understand what we're actually talking about. Let's see, some of the other reasons that people are giving that they feel that people are not embracing coaching in their organizations. Some are saying the culture doesn't really support it. Yeah, which may actually be true. And let's face it, when people are fearful, they often contract more into what feels familiar. So if you're living in a culture that feels like it really wants everything under control, and that's what's really valued, it's the risk of actually stepping out and trying something different is probably much higher than in a culture where that there's a better understanding of the value of taking a coaching approach. Yeah, and so let's see. Lorna is saying that some leaders may feel that they're giving up power or control. Yeah, this can be true. I think for a lot of leaders, there can be a sense of uncertainty about moving into a coaching-based approach to leadership, because there is a sense that if I'm telling people what to do, I am in control. But I think one of the things that's kind of becoming obvious to everybody right now is that we actually don't have control of very much of anything. And so the illusion of control, I think, is really quickly fading, which is probably why a lot of leaders are feeling even more uncomfortable, because if they don't have control or perceive they did, and now it doesn't feel like they do, what do they have? Which is a great place to begin the conversation about coaching-based leadership, because it really can help leaders feel more solid, like they're on more solid ground if they actually have a leadership style that feels like it works and feels like it is filling in the blanks that are needed in the world we find ourselves in. So keep that in mind. That's a good place to begin in our conversations with leaders about what coaching-based leadership really is and why it really matters. Let's see, one more. We've got, so Abe is saying, yes, we have leaders that may feel it is weak not to have everything together and have the answers and for the workers to follow. Yes, okay. So we're all on the same theme here, that for a lot of leaders, they have taken their power base from a sense of control. And what we're asking them to do is actually shift that power base to a place of not having control per se, but actually being in a place where they are evoking possibilities. It's a huge shift, and we really need to keep that in mind, which is another reason why I think sometimes leaders have a hard time with this transition, because the risk is really, really high, which is something we're going to talk about in just a minute. which is how do we make it safer to feel like they can make that transition and do it successfully without putting themselves at undue risk. So we'll talk more about that in just a moment. One of the other things I really want for you to notice, though, is that I think one of the reasons that sometimes when we're in conversation with leaders about what coaching-based leadership is and why it really, really matters, we may not actually take a coaching-based approach to that conversation. This happens quite a bit. I know that sometimes when people talk with me and they're frustrated that their leaders aren't embracing coaching more, and their frustration comes through the conversation so clearly. And in fact, sometimes rather than taking a coaching approach of evoking an understanding of what coaching is, they actually, sometimes we take a problem solving approach and say, here's what you should be doing, and here's why it matters, and here's what, you know, people need from you, and kind of pushing the point rather than creating the aha experience of how it's going to be beneficial. So one of the things I would invite you to do as you're thinking about being in these conversations with leaders about why coaching is to ask yourself, how are you approaching it? And so there's two things that we need to keep in mind when we approach this conversation. If we're going to work with leaders and ask them or invite them to think about how and why to embrace coaching-based leadership, there's a couple things we need to keep in mind. One is that people change to attain two things, okay, or when two conditions are met. The first one is they believe that they're going to benefit by doing something differently, all right, personally benefit in a way that's important to them. And we'll talk more about that in just a second. And the second is they believe that they can successfully attain whatever that benefit is, which is to say that they really believe that they can make whatever the transition is and have that be successful for them. So let's talk a little bit about both of those and kind of what that means. And then I'm going to take you through an example of a potential conversation that you might be in and talk a little bit about how we could take a coaching approach to that. So the first one is, you know, that people need to really personally believe that they are going to benefit by doing something differently. So I'll tell you, I've been a professional coach for 25 years now, which means I've been in a lot of coaching conversations. And for me, when I'm going to initiate the coaching conversation, one of the first things that I want to do is kind of look out, look big, and look at the world that the leader is in, and take a look at what the world really needs from that person. And the more senior the leader, the higher I'm going to look. So if I'm working with a really senior executive, I'm actually looking at the landscape that the company is in, what's going on in their particular industry, how that organization is positioned, and what the leaders need to be doing right now. You know, do they need to be really casting a compelling vision? Do they need to be coordinating the efforts of really diverse groups of people in order to focus on a more complex type of issue? Do they need to be role modeling courage and bravery so that people will take risks? I'm really trying to help them see what it is that the world needs from them. And as the leadership level gets a little bit lower, I'm probably going to bring that focus in a bit more. So if I've got someone who maybe is more at a mid-level, I might be talking with them about how really role modeling a certain kind of leadership for the leaders that they lead. Maybe they need to be role modeling coaching-based leadership so that their leaders understand what that looks like. So the idea is that I want to be able to share a story with this person that helps them see who they need to be as a leader to really fulfill the challenges that they find around them. The other thing I want to know that's really, really important is what really matters to that specific leader. And I will tell you that people will change to attain the things that matter most to them. And that the things that matter most are very individual to us. So I certainly have worked with leaders where hitting the numbers and really looking like a star is really important. So I might be pointing towards how making some changes in their leadership style is going to help them be more successful in that space. I also have worked with leaders for whom it was most important to really be there for their people, to be seen as someone who had their people's backs, that were there to support them. And so the benefit that that person would change for is going to be quite different. And so I'm going to weave a story that helps them see how changing how they're leading is actually going to help them to be a better leader for the people that they have such great value for supporting. So what I hope you're hearing is people, again, we're going to change to attain the things that matter most to them, and that they believe that they will benefit by making that change. And coaching begins by helping people to see what that could look like. And by the way, seeing is really important. We make our decisions with our emotions, and then we rationalize them with our minds, which means that in order for someone to choose to really commit and bring themselves forward and risk doing something differently, there needs to be an emotional connection to the outcome. So I'd love for you to be thinking about what kinds of things does your organization need from your leaders right now, and how will leaders benefit by really being able to embrace coaching as a leadership style. So if you've got ideas on that, go ahead and put it in the chat. It would be helpful probably for your colleagues to hear the kinds of benefits you think your leaders are going to derive by focusing on taking a coaching approach to leadership. So we'd love to hear from you around that. The other part of the equation is that people need to feel like they will be safe making the transition. And I cannot emphasize enough how risky it is for leaders to change the leadership style, particularly in an environment that feels very uncertain, and maybe therefore the risk is even higher. And so one of the questions, for those of us that support our leaders, we have to ask ourselves, which is, how do we make it safe to transition? Which means that people have to have a safe place to practice, right? They've got to have a place where they can go and get their own coaching around how to be a better coach. They need to have an approach that feels simple and easy and not awkward or difficult to remember or difficult to deal with. It's got to be something that they feel like they can weave right into the fabric of conversations without feeling awkward or weird. So it's really, really important when we're trying to make coaching safe and making the transition safe, one, to take a coaching approach to the leaders that we're dealing with. And so taking a coaching approach, by the way, means really dealing with what we at Cylient call the 3 C's of coaching. So it's getting curious about what's keeping them from being able to take a coaching approach to leadership. It's having compassion for the challenges that they are facing and the risks that they face in making this change. And it's having the courage to actually really take a coaching approach yourself to working with those leaders, and maybe even saying the things that you feel need to be said in order to support them to make that change. And so I think when we are role modeling what coaching-based leadership really looks and feels like, it makes it easier for leaders to feel like there's benefit in making that transition. So let me just take a quick look here. I had asked you what the benefit is for people. And so Tiffany is saying that leaders should be compassionate and understanding and go in with an open mind when coaching. I think that helps create that safe environment. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, coaching itself does create a safe environment. And that, by the way, is a benefit. If you think about it, a lot of leaders right now do not know how to connect with the people that they most want to serve. You know, if the only real tool they have in their toolbox right now is a traditional approach to leadership, they probably feel like they don't have a way to connect with people when they're feeling frightened or scared or uncertain, because that's not really in the wheelhouse of traditional leadership. You know, it's by taking a coaching approach of connecting with the emotion that's present that we're able to have those kinds of heartfelt conversations that people really need right now. Let's see some other things in the chat. Not everyone can be coached the same, so having emotional connection helps tailor coaching. Yeah, absolutely. Other benefits, development and motivation. Yep. When we take a coaching approach to leadership, it gives us a much better ability to develop and to motivate our people, particularly to move through these times of change. So lots and lots of benefit for making this transition. So what I want you to, again, step back when we're going to think about this for just a minute. If you're talking with a leader about moving into and really embracing coaching as a leadership style, the things to remember: one, they're going to make the decision based on their emotions, right? It's not the rationale, it's not the logic behind it that's going to convince them. It's actually the emotional sense, both of understanding how they will benefit by doing this differently. And by the way, whatever emotion they feel from the interaction they have with you is actually going to reinforce the power of coaching if you take a coaching approach to the conversation. And then once they have had the aha, this is valuable, making it safe to move into that transition. So it's really, really important. Okay, so let's talk about a more specific example. Let's talk about what this might look like if we were dealing with somebody specifically. So let's say that you are talking with a leader and she's complaining about her team, complaining that they're just not getting some things done, and that's a problem. And so it could be easy to kind of commiserate or be frustrated with her. But in that moment, I want you to go, in that complaint, underneath of that is a request. All right, by the way, under any complaint is always a request. Keep that in mind. And often complaining is a fantastic opportunity for coaching. So rather than joining in and complaining or being frustrated with this person, consider transitioning this into a coaching conversation, which could happen with a question. It could be as simple as, well, what's going on? You know, help me understand what's happening with your team. So do you hear how what we're doing is inviting some reflection? So take that emotion and ask the person to begin to reveal a little bit to you what's going on. And you can ask more questions to start to get a little bit of the dynamic of what's happening in the team. So things like, tell me what's going on, what are they saying, what are they doing, what are you noticing? Let's start to paint a picture of what's happening around this person. This is going to help you to hear some of the patterns that are there. It also may get the person to start to think about the team in a different perspective. Because notice, this team lead has a story. Her story is her team's not doing what they need to do, and she's blaming them a little bit. What we need to do is starting to loosen that story up a little bit so that we can help her see that maybe there's another possibility. And so questions that actually get us to start to get her to think about that differently are a place to begin. What I want to know next is what is in it for her? You know, what is it that she actually wants to get out of this situation? How is having her team, behave differently going to be helpful to her? So I might ask her literally, like, what would be different for you? Or what would be helpful to you if your team was to respond in a different way? Or what would success look like? You know, if your team was doing what you need or hope for them to do, what would that be? So I want to start to paint a picture of what the benefit's going to be of change. Now, at this point, the question I'm asking myself is, what is she not aware of that's going on in the team that might be causing this place of stickiness, or this team to be stuck? you know, because whatever people do, it makes sense to them. So how is it, what's going on for this team that they're not responding in the way she's expecting? And by the way, this is where we usually meet the limit of questions. If the only approach that you're using in coaching is questions, it's a pretty small box that you can play in. Because if there's things that people are not aware of, it doesn't matter how many questions you ask them, they're not going to see it. All right. And so this is where I'm going to start using my insight to potentially ignite the insight of this leader to see some other possibilities. And again, I might not know for sure what's going on. I'm not looking to give that person the answer. But what I do want to do is point towards potential patterns that might be causing the team to behave the way that they are, so that we can invite them to do something differently. So it might be, sounds to me something, I might say like, sounds to me like maybe your team is uncertain about what they need to focus on right now. You know, based on some of the things that you shared with me, it sounds like your team is heading in a lot of different directions. And then I'm going to just wait and hear how this person responds to what I'm saying. If that doesn't seem like it hit the nail on the head, I might ask, well, what do you think might be getting in your team's way? What do you think is keeping them from being able to focus in the way you've just described? So what I'm wanting to do is to create an aha experience of seeing that there's a missing part or a missing possibility for this team, and create that aha of this leader seeing that maybe there's a different way she could be with the team that would be helpful to them. So let's say she buys into the idea that, you know, actually maybe they're not certain about what it is they need to do. Well, I'm going to turn it back to her and ask, well, what could you do differently? How could you help them to be in that question? And if she's got some ideas, that'd be fantastic. Let's explore it. If she's like, I don't know, I got no idea, I don't know what to do. Cool. Well, then that's where we're going to focus the coaching. If she's uncertain what to do, then that's the place we begin. Again, I'm looking for what's stuck. And so I might take the coaching in that direction. What would be helpful for you then to get a better sense of how to focus your team's efforts? And this, by the way, could be a great place to introduce the coaching approach to leadership. I might even share with her, you know, what I've been doing with you up to this point is actually kind of taking a coaching approach to this exploration. Do you think it might be helpful for you to do something similar with your team? And if that sounds like it's going to be helpful, if it's been helpful to her so far, there's a good chance that she'll say, yeah, I could see how working with my team could be, in that way, could be actually helpful to them. At which point I'm going to really explore where she's at with coaching and how I can best support her to be able to transition to that kind of approach. So hopefully you can hear, so what I've been doing here, hopefully you can hear, I'm trying to understand what the team needs from her. I'm helping her, I'm discovering what her story is about what's stuck, helping to illuminate some possibilities, and using a coaching approach to do that, so that I'm actually role modeling the very thing that I think is going to be most helpful to her. That personally is how I approach helping leaders see the benefit of taking a coaching approach to anything. And notice that it's done with great and deep compassion. Right? So it's not making the leader wrong. It's not pointing a finger at what she maybe has done that has helped them or had them arrive at this place. It's having as much compassion for her as I'm hoping she's going to have for her people who are maybe struggling at this point, and for her to understand what it's like to be greeted in that place. So that's kind of how I do things. I would love to know what questions you've got in terms of any situations that you're facing where you might want us to play with this kind of approach and explore it a little bit further. So I would be happy to do that. And also wanted to just answer, there was a few of you sent me questions in preparation for our conversation. So feel free to put any questions that you've got in the chat. And I thought I would just take a moment and address some of the other questions I haven't gotten to as part of what I've talked about right now. So I want to make sure that you're walking away with whatever you feel that you need to be able to invite your leaders to feel that it's both worthwhile and safe to really embrace coaching as their leadership style right now. So people were sometimes, one of the questions that I got was, what would motivate leaders to take this approach right now? Like, why would they want to learn and grow if they're happy with where they are and they don't see themselves advancing, or they don't really aspire to go to the next level? And so what I would tell you is just staying afloat in this world of uncertainty means that we all must learn very quickly. This is table stakes now for everybody. Whether you aspire to be the CEO or you just want to stay relevant in this world, if we are not coaching people to learn how to learn, we are doing them a massive disservice. All right, regardless of whether they're a leader or an individual contributor, I can't think of anything more important right now than coaching people to learn how to learn. And this is the message we've got to get out to everybody, that our coaching needs to be about really awakening that potential to learn and grow in the moment. And that is why leaders need to embrace it for themselves and for their people. Let's see, I'm going to look, I've got a few questions here I wanted to get to. Says, what are wondering in free model of coaching and leadership? Oh, good. I liked how we approached it. That's great. What role does trust have in coaching? Specifically, how do you encourage leaders to communicate more the important factors, true factors behind business objectives? Yes. Yeah, this is all about trust. And by the way, the world that we are headed into, because we're not going back to the world that we left behind before the pandemic, we're not going back. We're only going forward. And I think actually that's the really, really good news. And the world that we are going towards will be founded on trust, because we have to trust each other in order to build the connections, ask and answer these big multifaceted questions that are now the things that dominate. So trust is the foundation that coaching is built upon. And trust is being able to say sometimes, I don't know. Trust is saying, here's what I do know. These are the questions I can't answer. Here's my commitment to you about how I will communicate with you. That is what trust is. And we need it. I mean, we need it now for people to trust and take risks. And we are going to need it even more in the future. So really encouraging people to use coaching approaches to build a foundation of trust is essential on so many levels, right? Just for the well-being, their own well-being, the well-being of their team, as the foundation of a culture that's going to evolve out of these times that we find ourselves in. Trust is everything. Let's see, Kathy says, absolutely support coaching leaders who have concerns or issues with the team. Sometimes inserting interventions like a course or a team session is not the best way to deal with the issue. Yep. It's the leaders' ability to help their team work through issues together. Yeah, exactly. This is not always a training issue. It's not always just a skill issue. Although here's the thing I would tell you is that often if people lack the skill to be able to do and feel confident having these kinds of conversations, they don't happen because it becomes a risk issue. So what we want to look at is, where's the risk? You know, what is the risk for change and how do we lower it? Whatever it takes, whether it's not putting them in the class, but really just individually taking people through something, whether it's working with a team and helping the team use coaching as a shared language, by the way, which is really, really powerful. If you take a leadership team and instill for them, for us, we use our untying the knot approach to coaching. And when we instill that as a shared language in a leadership team, powerful things happen. Because instead of arguing all the time, they start focusing on how to untie knots together. Profound. Whatever it is, really, again, it's take a coaching approach to helping make this transition. And your question's got to be, what's not happening? what is getting in the way of people embracing this, and what is the lowest risk, most efficient way you can, untie those knots and help people to feel confident about moving forward. Yes, so where does accountability fit in after coaching? Yeah, I've had a couple questions about accountability and coaching. And here's kind of my thought on it, which is traditional leadership is all based on, you will do this and I'll hold you accountable, and there'll be a punishment if you don't meet that accountability. And that's just all based on fear. I personally prefer that what we do is we set the intention to have an outcome, that we invite people to make a commitment towards how they're going to attain that outcome, and that we coach them if they're not attaining that outcome on what is getting in the way. So rather than kind of coming down like a hammer and saying you didn't meet your accountability, if I'm taking a coaching approach, my question is, well, you made a commitment that we were going to have XYZ done. It looks like it didn't get done. Help me understand what got in the way. And what I want to do is use that as an opportunity for learning, not as an excuse. And if this continues to be an issue, then we may have a different conversation, not as much of a coaching conversation. But I think what we want to do is coach to commitments that we invite people to make as a result of the insights that they experience through coaching. I think that's a really powerful way to pull people forward. Let's see, please advise on the role of HR and line managers in introducing coaching in an organization that does not seem to support the coaching theory. Well, I think, again, stories. What I'm going to say is there's always someone, I call them the imaginal selves. They're the people that see the possibility. And I think it is incumbent upon those of us that see the possibility to figure out how we're going to share the story of why something matters and how the world will benefit from doing it. And so whether it's, introducing the concept through maybe something like this, like a podcast or a dialogue, or, an article that's written that illuminates the power of these approaches, I would give thought to what is getting in the way. And again, both people and organizations will change when they believe they'll benefit by doing something differently. And so I think HR, line managers, anyone who sees the possibility, who can, one, be the change, all right? So you're not just talking it. It doesn't work if you use an old traditional problem-solving approach and complain that we're not getting this. You've got to, really embody the change, and then tell the story of how that is making a difference in whatever way that you are doing it. Real quick story. I remember working with a gentleman many years ago who really embraced coaching very, very early in an organization that didn't quite get it. And he had taken coaching skills training himself, and he just ran his team on a coaching-based approach. That's just what he did. It wasn't happening around him, but he did it anyway. And pretty soon everyone went, what's going on over there? Why are those people so happy? Why are their numbers so good? Why are they getting so much done? And then he started telling them about his leadership style. So he didn't evangelize it, he was it. And the numbers spoke for themselves. So find how you're going to share that story and be sure to share it. Okay, let's see. Yeah, okay, so we're getting some more input. I love that you're coaching each other through the chat. I think that's fantastic. Kathy, thank you. Talking about wondering how to have our HR team do the same with everything that's going on now. We want them to develop a coaching approach themselves. Yeah, I think actually that's one of the best things you can do, is use the people who touch a lot of people, like HR, like L&D, like your change management group. Really, really get them to embrace coaching as an approach. And by the way, bring them together and let them support each other. The best thing that you can do when you're really trying to build a culture of coaching is find these people that get it and connect them to support each other so that they build their confidence, their capability, and the story that you're sharing. So find your other, well, again, imaginal selves, find the other like types, find ways to bring them together. Maybe it's, you know, pizza lunch. I guess we can't get together for lunch anymore. Sorry. Maybe it's a pizza Zoom call, you know, once a month. You bring your own pizza or whatever you want to bring for lunch. And just, you know, compare notes, share stories, talk about where you see the openings for these kinds of possibilities. Here's what I'm gonna tell you is I personally believe that coaching-based leadership is absolutely essential right now, because it helps us move through change much more quickly and smoothly. It helps people feel more centered and powerful in these times of uncertainty, and the world is going to remain very fluid for quite some time. So it's kind of like giving everybody swimming lessons, okay? It's like we can keep our head above water, and we can actually make some solid progress when we take a coaching approach to the fluid world that we find ourselves in, and we support others to do the same. It becomes easier for all of us. And it builds the foundation for the world to come, which is what we're all moving towards each in our own way. So I hope that this was helpful to you. We will be giving each of you a little kind of a handout on 5 things that you can do to really help your leaders to embrace coaching-based leadership. If there's anything that we at Cylient can do to help you, we would be delighted to be of service to you. I'm also doing a weekly video series called How Do I Lead Now?, which are just little 10-minute snippets that are kind of planting seeds of ideas of how leaders can transition to coaching-based leadership. They're free, they're in our blog. I hope you'll tune in. I hope you'll find them helpful. And I hope you'll come back for future dialogues where I'll continue to share with you ideas on how to make coaching a way of life. Thanks so much. Bye for now.